things that might not look one way, but they are. Let me say this, the one in the room here who's actually better at this, and I would encourage you to talk to me, is probably Tom in the process. It's an honor. I want to just take a quick look that I wasn't going to say, that as part of being president about Caucus, I'm also an activist. Before I did Vote or Die, with P. Diddy, if you do have a t-shirt, that's funny. Before that, before we did this about vote campaign, this past election cycle, there was 32,000 people in one day. Before that, I've always been an activist and a minister. And I was a chaplain in the Air Force, and I had begun to speak out against what the reason that we're here. That people can get in office. It's literally a life or death issue. This is not a game. When you can assume to that position and be in that position of power, decisions you make literally are life and death. There are now thousands of American soldiers. My job as a chaplain was to bury soldiers. And so seeing soldiers come home and being in that position, it's life and death. For the millions of Iraqis who have now lost their homes and who are now dead, this process of ensuring that we have fair elections so that we can have the people in power who are about the people's business and not about corporations' business, or this who have the most money, is very serious, as we have seen for the past 8 years. So with that, obviously as an activist, I just want to make a shout out, as we say in hip hop. Being an activist was very outspoken, obviously for my hearing and drawl in my voice, originally from Louisiana as well. So being outspoken for people who were in the Gulf Coast, and Katrina, and obviously against this war, my lawyer, and I would get in trouble and speak out, be there to protect me against the big guy, who was the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And obviously I just want to make a speech to Moni Sloan, who's here in the audience, who helped and would be there fighting for the little guy. Please give her a round of applause. If she was not here, I would not be here. So that's very serious. I want to understand how important that is. Let me say this in regards to what I want to discuss about this process. In the past election cycle, the reason this issue is so important, and I'm so glad that we have a new president, and that's wonderful, and a new Congress, Republicans and Democrats and independents, it's fantastic. But for a man and a person of color, the right to vote is very deep. And I just want to make sure at this moment, evoke the names of those who gave their lives. James Chaney, Eldridge Cleaver, Medgar Evers, Andrew Goodman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, A. Philip Randolph, Rosa Parks, Michael Swear. Those who've given their lives just so that men and women of color, women, people of bisexual, lesbian, Native Americans, Latinos, Latinas could have the right to vote in this land called America. And so the discussion we're having today is not simply a discussion, simply to discuss about the data, which is so critical, but it's a discussion that people have given their lives for. So we can be at a moment, so there can be possibly a person of color, which we now have in the White House, hopefully one day a woman in the White House, and hopefully one day maybe somebody who is lesbian or gay, bisexual, transgender, and open about it in the White House. So everybody in this country can be who they need to be. And the reason this discussion is important is we're moving from, in that day, they had a poll tax. And for those who might not know, a poll tax was a voting fee charge to reduce the numbers of blacks eligible to vote. That was the way. So now, in that process, it was put forth that a poll tax. So if you would come to vote, they would put forth the poll tax. And at that time, and many of you who were around at that time understood Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was very powerful. And it was used to cut away from voting. But today, my generation, the YouTube, MySpace, Twitter, Facebook generation, is not fighting Jim Crow. We're not fighting to end a poll tax. As a matter of fact, Jim Crow was beaten. But like you had children, so did Jim Crow. And Jim Crow children are much more sophisticated. Matter of fact, I don't call them Jim Crow anymore. We now don't have Jim Crow. We now have what I call James Crow Jr. Esquire. And James understands that he's not just going to put a poll tax and put up barriers in communities up in Maine or in Arizona to stop people from voting. He's not going to put you up there and say, well, if you're black or if you're a woman or if you're gay, lesbian, whatever their reasons may be, he or she won't do that. The Crows have a new way. So they won't impact the vote, but they will impact the entire election. And in impacting the entire election, they have recognized once they're just going to the voter, we can just go to the politician and impact them by just giving them enough money. So they are constantly fundraising, and they will do the will of those. So James Crow Jr. Esquire, who is much more sophisticated, who has a drop-top BMW, works on K Street, drinks Starbucks lattes, no longer just follow with the straw hat, has become much more sophisticated. So we must become much more sophisticated as well. And so we must put forth fair elections now, at this time. It's critical because under the Fair Elections Now Act, which I am advocating, candidates for Congress would run for office without relying on large contributions. It's critical. The money from the big money bundlers and the James Crow Jr. Esquires of the world would be freed from constant fundraising in order to focus on the business of the people. People died, literally, for us to have the right to vote. And now in the 21st century, what I believe is our lunch counter moment for the 21st century, we must be as vigilant to ensure fair elections in the 21st century as they were as vigilant to ensure people could vote in the 20th century. It's critical at this time. Now, the Hip Hop Caucus is a small organization. We now have grown to about 700,000 people in 30 states and 48 cities. Most of you have heard I've not gone to college. Most of them have just been, in some cases, have rebuilt their lives or are just good people, hardworking in Detroit and factories, or on the shipyards in Oakland, or here in IKEA in Laurel, Maryland. Folks who want to have their say in this process. And until we fix our elections process, democracy is not going forward in America. We've got to change this. If they can have a dream like Dr. King. People died. So a young brother like me could be in a room like this and discuss elections to you. Not just black people died, but white, black, male, female, Christians, Jews, atheists, deists, Muslims, Buddhists. They died for our country. We are now at that moment now, 9 years into the 21st century, where if we do not pass the Fair Elections Act now, then we will have failed all of those who gave their lives. what does it matter if millions vote, but the election is not fair to begin with? On the climate, on endless wars, this election process is our lunch hour moment for the 21st century. So I conclude simply by saying this. I hope we take this moment seriously. And I hope in the audiences tonight there are Fannie Hayes this morning, and Andrew Goodman's, and Medgar Evers. I hope this morning that we are gathered here today to do all we must do to ensure that the legislation that's being pushed forth now passes. If we don't pass it now, 9 into the 21st century, we would have failed all those who gave their lives in the 20th century. Let's pass fair elections now. Thank you.
And we are really very honored and so pleased to welcome